So staying with 3D PT. Happy New Year. This will be first video of 2021. And on this, what I've done for this project is made this snake fidget, which is a revision of something I did a long time ago. Now, when I did this, I wanted to review TinkerCAD versus SketchUp free. And for this, I've come to a few conclusions. First off, SketchUp free is really trying to push you towards their paid versions to the point where it's actually making SketchUp free uncomfortable to use. Not only do you lose a lot of basic features in SketchUp free, but also just the capability to do some basic functions in SketchUp free is not there. Also with SketchUp free, it is more based off systems like what you see interfaces, what you see in like Fusion 360, SketchUp Pro or SketchUp Students. So if you're not used to those types of interfaces, it's going to be more difficult for students. I actually have my class doing this with SketchUp for an architecture unit, and they're having a lot of issues trying to figure out some of the controls in SketchUp free. TinkerCAD has more basic primitive shapes, so you're not going to have the heavy-duty engineering, all the features you want for like a really complex object. But if it's just something where you're reverse engineering a toy or just trying to make something quick, TinkerCAD's better for that. SketchUp free, unfortunately, is not educator friendly. There's no class account you could set up with it, unlike TinkerCAD. And I can't recommend using SketchUp free unless you have more of a background with using something like Fusion 360. So unfortunately, SketchUp is trying to push you to use the paid versions really too hard to the point where it actually degrades your experience with the free version. Now, I understand that that they're not going to release everything in the free version, but it's hit. They've kind of stepped over that line for SketchUp where like the free version isn't doing them any favors going forward. Whereas TinkerCAD, yes, they want you to use Fusion 360 afterwards, and there is a way to actually import from TinkerCAD to Fusion. But even just for a basic program where, TinkerCAD's met a niche requirement where people don't need that heavy-duty engineering software. They just need something to knock out a few blocks, a few primitive shapes to, make a hook or something. And TinkerCAD's excellent for that. SketchUp, unfortunately, is more engineering related. So if you're going in that direction, you can do that using either TinkerCAD or SketchUp, one of the paid versions. But for just playing around basic CAD work, I cannot recommend I cannot recommend SketchUp free. And I've been trying to use SketchUp free for a few months now, and I just have not been able to get it to work. And I have a certificate in AutoCAD and and I've used SolidWorks and some other heavy-duty CAD programs. I'm sure with other versions of SketchUp it may work better, but the free version unfortunately kind of shoots SketchUp in its foot. So I'm going to call the winner on this TinkerCAD, because you can't. My experience so far has not been very positive with SketchUp free. Now I know that people are going to be like, "Oh, SketchUp lets you do all that," but it's the paid version. And if you're just trying to learn how to use SketchUp, you don't have to access every single feature, but you should be able to at least have a running understanding of SketchUp. So keep your eye on 3D PT's channel. In the future, I'm going to do some updates, like updating a video on the outdoor experiment. Also have other projects throughout the year. I am working on my drone Part 107 license as well. So hopefully I'll start being able to put some drone footage up. If you have any questions, please email me, stan@3dpt.club, or leave a comment below. As always, if you like what you see, please like, comment, and subscribe. Have a good day. Stan with 3dpt. So there's been a project I actually want to revise that I did a long time, about 2 years ago. There's a classic toy called a snake fidget or a flex fidget, and it's basically you just take whatever scraps of wood you have left in your wood pile, come into nice cubes, cut some slots and cut some slots in them, and then run a piece of elastic cord through them. And the result is you get a nice snake fidget. And it's just something that just clicks and folds and twists all around. Now, when I did this initially, I started with the classic cube shape. And then the good idea fairy struck. And for engineers, you all know this feeling when, dang, you get a good idea and I'm going to take it 10 steps farther than it ever needs to. So here's one of the test pieces, and you can see it's pretty, it's chamfered on the edges, and it did print a little bit rough here. So this was the one that actually, probably one of the better ones. I also did this one, which when I tested it, didn't work. It just wouldn't hold its shape, and it lost a lot of tension, so it just fell apart. So this ended up kind of in my bin of rejects. But recently, since I got the Taz Pro, I'm going to try and revise this, doing dual color printing. But I also want to test something, because I've been playing around with both TinkerCAD and SketchUp free. So I kind of want to use this as an opportunity to do a shootout between the two. So I'll open up both programs, and I'll do the same design in both. And I'll kind of compare and contrast them that way. Now, for the snake fidget, just to get an idea what it looks like. Yeah, this. So, you might have seen it called a, it's sold commercially as a What's It mini fidget puzzle. Or flexi puzzle fidget toy. And I actually had one of these somewhere, and of course it's buried or disappeared. There's also commercial companies that make a What's It fidget with a couple different designs. And you can see here the block on it. The blocks are just painted different colors. And the way it's constructed, it just folds together. And what's cool is you could then take it and just play with it and challenge yourself to do different designs. And so there's a couple different versions made commercially of it, but this has actually been a kind of a project or a kid's toy for ages, because the whole idea was to make was to literally just take the scraps and bits from carpentry projects and do that. So I'm going to pretty much reverse engineer the What's It fidget, where it's rectangular with cuts going into it and hole going through. And I'm also going to do dual color. So I'm going to test it with black and white just to really get that contrast. And let's see, this version, this has 6 pieces. They're larger. They're about, say about 2 inches long by about 1 inch wide. And the What's It smaller flexi ones, this has 12 links long, but they're about 1 centimeter on each centimeter cubed. So I'm going to hold off on doing the smaller version. I kind of like doing just the big chunky one like this. And this side I'm looking at is the Autism Community Store, which is in here in Denver. So actually, if you want to support the autism community, this is one of the most unique stores because it's dedicated specifically to autistic people. So it's autismcommunitystore.com, and I've actually sold fidgets with them before. So for this, I'm going to use this paracord, elastic paracord that I actually got a long time ago to fix tent poles. So if you've ever gone camping with a tent and you've thrown out your tent pole and it clicks itself together, there's a elastic shock cord in it like this. And so I'm going to put a hole in the center first, and the hole needs to be at least 3 millimeters wide, so make it about 4 to so this cord could go through them all. And then as we cut this, it'll do that part. So looking at the pictures of the fidget to design it, the way it works is that the thread or the shock cord that comes out goes through about half the width of the base of the cube, or base of the rectangle. Because if it went further, it would go down further and not kind of line up. So it uses it almost as uses the cord as almost a pin. So my box is 20 wide, so it only needs to go half of that. And you can see here for this design, they just put 2 cuts along the X and Y axis. So that's going to be easy to do, and I'll show you how to do that in TinkerCAD and SketchUp. So in TinkerCAD, to do that, I'm going to go back to my basic shapes, make a cylinder that's 4 wide. And with TinkerCAD, you could free eyeball where that hole is located, or you could select both, and you can actually center it based on the footprint of the shape. So this would be perfectly centered. Now the one disadvantage of this is if you have an asymmetric shape, your center function isn't going to work. And in a previous video where I did the pencil shelf, I kind of hit that issue. Now SketchUp, if I wanted to do this, I could select a circle, and the radius, since I wanted 4, I want the radius to be 2. And now to get this to go through, do that. And press pull it all the way through. Now I could pull this one through all the way, so I could actually do that, and if I click on this, put it all the way through. There probably is a trick to getting to go all the way through, and I just have to remember what it is. And I just accidentally deleted that, which I didn't want to do. And you can see here the camera control to do what you want is just different. And of course there's always the undo option. And now yeah, so with this I could click on the endpoint of that to put it through. So I accidentally did it a little bit wrong there, but now I have a hole going completely through, which is what I want. So it is a little bit harder to control and get the functions to work the way you want them to. So the next thing I'll do is show you how to round or chamfer the edges. So when you open both accounts, both SketchUp and TinkerCAD are web-based, and so you just need an email address to create an account. For TinkerCAD, you have to be over 13. Otherwise, if you say you're under 13, it will restrict your access, and your parents basically have to check you in. So there's been times when I've taught this as TinkerCAD, I've had to tell students to, if they're under 13, to say they're older, which, let's face it, a lot of kids do that anyway. With TinkerCAD, you have, this is the gallery that you get when you first open it up, and you can see all the different projects I've added here. TinkerCAD is also nice for teachers because it's got a circuit section, so you could actually draft up Drano projects in TinkerCAD, as well as code blocks. So you could do different types of coding in both block and JavaScript with this. TinkerCAD also has been expanding their lessons that teachers have written and submitted to them. So they've actually been paying teachers to write lessons and submit them, which is great because then you could go straight to their site, pull up lessons and activities that are field tested and ready to go. So I'll talk more about the lessons later. But what I like about this is you can visually see really quick what your project is, and it does give you a quick overview. When you open TinkerCAD, it gives you a work plane here, and it gives you a randomly assigned name. So the first thing I always have my students do is always change that name, so I'm going to call this the snake toy. SketchUp comes to this, SketchUp Free comes to this gallery. So I've got some older projects that I've been doing, as well as a house project. And when you create a new template, it asks you if you want it in meters, millimeters, or feet and inches. So TinkerCAD, you have to change the measurements by going into your grid properties here. Notice it has inches, millimeters, and bricks. So I'll show you what that does later. But with SketchUp, you kind of choose your template right here. And here you get your build plane, and this is Helen, provide for scale. And so you notice that it gives you an infinite perspective in different directions. It doesn't give you a grid per se, it just has you working on a plane here. For design work though, in TinkerCAD, this grid here, the work plane, is actually fit to some of the largest build plates on the market. So you can keep an eye on your scale this way visually, and make sure that you don't build things bigger than your build plate. So a difference with SketchUp is it names your file as untitled, and so you have to click it and rename it. So I'll call this one Snake Toy as well. And the first difference that I want to look at between the two, TinkerCAD's Camera controls are obviously a lot different from SketchUp. Now in TinkerCAD you have this left side here, and you could control it with this box just like a video game. And this I think is a lot more intuitive and visual, which is great if you're learning how to do it or if you just want to look around quickly. And if I bring a primitive shape on, I could hit the home button if I ever get a weird perspective. So if I do something like that where I get a weird perspective and I need to reset it, I could hit a home view. Or I could click on this fit by hitting this or the letter F. And that'll bring that one piece that I'm selected into focus, plus or minus, to zoom in or out. Now the one thing I haven't liked about this is that it has an orthographic view. So if you click on that, you get the orthographic view, which starts looking really weird really quick if you're trying to model it. And I've had students try and do this and they've gotten really frustrated, so I'd almost wish this was actually a hidden button or something you could maybe pull up on a menu here. So it's a quirk that I've hit a couple times teaching this, where students will try and model like this and it just does not work real well. So I always leave it in perspective. In SketchUp, however, you notice that there's no primitive shapes anywhere. That in order to draw something, I have to find it here, draw it, and it only draws the shapes. So if I wanted to bring it up, I'd have to press pull it, and I could still make a cube like that. Now with the camera controls for SketchUp, they're different, because here you have to use the orbit menu. So I'm in orbit right now, and I can move around this. Or if I needed to pan, I could do this by holding the shift key down or selecting the pan function. As well, I could zoom in and out, or zoom in on that surface, or zoom extents. Now if you ever have a question about what this does, there's a graduation instructor setting here. So this will actually open up an instructor that shows you all the things you can do with that function, which is a nice feature to actually have as you're learning. And if you ever have a question about what to do, because one of the things that's typical of higher end programs like this is that there's usually like 2 or 3 functions within each tool. So sometimes you just have to pull up the instructor to help you do that. TinkerCAD does not have that readily available. So for that, you'd probably have to go back and do a search on the blog section. in trying to do this in SketchUp, I'm just out of ideas on how to proceed going forward because I'm trying to do the same thing here in TinkerCAD with this kind of design, and I'm just out of ideas. So TinkerCAD or SketchUp's definitely a engineering heavy program, and I'm sure there's probably there's techniques to do all this, but visually TinkerCAD's a lot easier to work with, and for what I'm doing, just making simple blocks with patterns in them, I'm just going to go ahead and kind of grunt through in TinkerCAD instead. SketchUp something, if you could take a class, learn more on it, that'd be definitely helpful.
So I gave up on SketchUp for doing kind of the design pieces I want. I was just going to wreck my brain too hard trying to do all that. And again, you can't group or ungroup. So now that I have this all together, I'm just going to print it in black and yellow because that's what I have on my printer. So all the black pieces, I'm going to group together. And the more clicks you get, the longer it takes for it to render. Same thing. And in TinkerCAD, you have to group them all in the same orientation, same location. Because if you don't, it won't separate the files out. So all the yellow pieces now I'm going to group. And it definitely takes a minute to render all those. And in TinkerCAD, when it's rendering it, it does it in red. And I'm just going to check some things to make sure the holes go all the way through. Now that the pieces are ready, you export them as two pieces. So I made all the yellow pieces one and then the black pieces their own. And when I export it and then open it up here, tell it probably doesn't really like all of that, but you can see how it's two pieces. So right now I have yellow and black set up on the printer, and I don't feel like changing filament. So those pieces there are the yellow ones, so I'm saying those to extruder 1, and those to extruder 2. And right now it's trying to render them as two separate files, which we don't want. So we're going to select this one and this one, merge, give it a moment for that. And in Cura, I have mine set to slice for every command, every time there's a change. And it's saying this is a 2-hour, it's going to be at least 8 hours. Because support, yeah, it's going to need some support. Actually, get by without it. the bridge here is only like 4 millimeters wide, so I'm not too worried about that. Definitely helps. 3. The infill's pretty thick for this. I can go down to 10 on this. Just because it's a small piece and there's not a lot going on with it. And over on the left side where I did the spiral, that's actually a really cool pattern there. This was just fun to play around with and design in TinkerCAD. Yeah, that'll cover it. So, and this is at 3, both at 0.3, putting PLA on both. The Polylight PLA settings are pretty standard for this. Might need to dial it in just a touch, but we'll definitely go from there. Let's see. So I'll save this to my file. So it's ready to go. I'll save the time lapse, maybe if I do another set of colors, but I'll save the time lapse for later. So with this project, I'm just kind of going through SketchUp and TinkerCAD and kind of seeing what I can do. Now this is the final print that I made, and this is just, I've seen it called like a what's it fidget or a snake fidget, just depending on what site you're looking at. Now all this I had to design in TinkerCAD, because SketchUp won't let you do union or subtracting objects in the free version. So that's a big turnoff for me, because if you're just trying to play around with SketchUp, you should be able to at least combine objects. Unfortunately, SketchUp doesn't let you. SketchUp Free doesn't let you do that. It's a freemium version, so they're pushing you really hard to upgrade to a pro or student version. And all I did for this is I took this elastic cord, ran it through the ends, knotted off with some tension, and this way I could make it into a puzzle. And just had some fun with this. So this particular file version, I might put up on another. This file version I'll probably put up on a My Manufactory and maybe sell it. I'm kind of debating whether I need to clean up some things. But I'm also going to sell a simplified version where it's just a single color block on my Etsy page. So looking at some of the other differences with Pro, SketchUp Free, and TinkerCAD. For educators, the big thing is TinkerCAD is free and has a classroom setting.